losers. And when you take a look at some key sectors that will be taking a bite out of this finance, or rather the budget of 2024-2025, I'm talking about sectors like the communication sector, where there is some proposals that when the finance bill of 2024 is passed the way it is without some amendment, then that means that this sector will actually receive a big hit as far as this particular finance bill is concerned. We have the proposed 2.5 motor vehicle taxation. We have the betting firms and lottery that will also be taking a bite of this particular finance bill of 2024. In regard now to the budget that was read today in Parliament, we have the manufacturers of the beverage, and this in particular include alcohol. Remember, today the CS said that alcohol will be taxed based on the content of the alcohol level. And of course, a key instrument, or rather a takeaway note, is that government has freeze hiring of for the next 1 year. This is just in line to try and reduce some unnecessary expenditure, and this is something that the government is very keen in regard to this particular this budget of the 2024-2025. And of course, to help me unpack this particular discussion, that we'll be taking a look at, even as we take toll on what is who are the winners and of course the losers. Remember, we have seen some very key sectors like the Ministry of Education getting the lion's share of this particular budget. We have the executive that will also be adding a few coins on top of what of course they had been allocated in the finance bill, or rather in the budget of the 2023-2024. And of course, in line with this, we have the Ministry of Defense, who have seen their budget actually increase, in same with the Ministry of Interior. And this is a discussion that many people will be keen to see, and even we are asking about the priorities. Which sector do you think should have been allocated more of this, the budget? And of course, to help us unpack this discussion is CPA Cornelius Ngetich. Thank you so much for making time. Well, this particular budget of 2024-2025, a historic one, as they say. And when you look at, the proposed budget, the 4 trillion, are we simply living out of your means? Will you use this? All right.
Yeah, thank you, Evans, for having me. And yes, this budget is fairly ambitious. I think it is. It has been a long journey coming. We are at a point as a country where we are at optimal taxation. Any further increase is really hurting the economy, is hurting the mwananchi. And the government is at pains. It has to provide the services, and it has to somehow mobilize revenue. So it's an ambitious budget, but they don't have much wiggle room. Somehow it has to be done. Yeah.
Well, let me take you back to at least 2 financial years. We had the 2.4 trillion budget. That was a record at that particular time. Then we had 3.7 trillion, the first financial budget of the Kenya Kwanza administration. Now we have 4 trillion. Well, when you look at the trajectory and of course the trend that you're following, then as a Kenyan who is very keen on this matters finance and how it actually affect Kenyans in regard to tax collection and all this, into when you put into fact all these the parameters that bring up matters finance and the economy, then you begin to wonder about this trajectory. Well, are we really, chewing a lot that we can, biting a lot that we can chew as far as a nation is concerned? And even when you look at the revenue target, the projection that we set for ourselves as a nation, are they really realistic?
So, for almost the last 10 years, we have always attained
The mic, you forgot.
for almost the last 10 years.
Yes.
We are, on average, we have always, as a country, attained 93% of the targeted revenue collection. What this means, therefore, is that it should be form a basis for decision making. And whenever on annual basis we hear about these budgets and we hear again these new targets, definitely then it means we are going way ahead. You see, our economy is growing at a rate of, last year was at 5.6%, but budget growth is much higher than that. And then definitely the question is, where do we expect these funds to come from? Because the economy is growing at a much lower rate. And that's where we end up having very interesting revenue-raising proposals, which tend to hurt us as an economy, tend to hurt Kenyans in their pockets. You see, in the previous year, last year, the first KK budget, the focus was more in what we call direct tax, the income taxes. This year we are looking more at what we call indirect tax. So last year it quote unquote it attacked the income of our incomes and reduced the disposable income. So once that happened, then this year you have small amounts to utilize to meet your personal expenses, to meet your expenditure at home. And then now this year, the prices of goods are going to go up. So when you talk of indirect taxes, these are VAT, these are excise duties, these are all these things we are seeing being introduced. And remember last year, your disposable income went down because of housing levy, because of revised pay rate, revised corporation tax. And then now this year, you have goods, prices of goods going up because you are introducing eco levy, plastics. You use plastic to package a lot of goods, import levy and all that. So with that, then the reduced disposable income last year, this year we are seeing increase in cost of prices of goods. It only means therefore that, reduction in savings, inability for us to meet our day-to-day expenses, our budgets at home. It can only point to a difficult time ahead.
All right. And talking about difficult times ahead, well, from expert point of view, when you look at the proposed, of course, taxation, we have the 16% VAT on bread. We have 25% on, crude and, cooking oil. That if this proposed finance bill of 2024 sees the light of the day, then that means the price of basic essentials commodities will actually hike. And it raises a very important question as far as this particular discussion is concerned. Can you, achieve the projected, of course, revenue that the government wants to collect in this particular financial year of 2024-2025 through overtaxation? How does it work?
So, as I mentioned earlier, records, data shows in the last 10 years, our average collections has been at 93%. I remember in those 10 years, things have seemed to be good or better than today. At least we have always felt the direction was not in the best way, but things were somehow better. And now we are today where things are really hard. Businesses are closing.
All right.
People are losing jobs. There are layoffs all over. All this affects the revenues because those people who have lost jobs there is no longer pay tax. So there's lots of tax. Companies closing down or shifting businesses from this country to other countries, that's lots of tax. So what it therefore means is that at best, most probably will achieve 93% as historical average shows. However, it could only mean then things could look tighter. We may not attain even at 93%. It could come lower. And what that means to our budget is that there will be a deficit. there will be increased a wider deficit in our, because the expenditures, unfortunately, most of the time tend to go up as we start seeing the supplementary budgets along the way. Looking back at supplementary budget that was just tabled in Parliament a few weeks ago for the financial year that is ending, we have seen the budget grown actually to 3.88 of last year's budget. So the expenditure side keeps increasing, and on the other side, the revenue mobilization taxes keep shrinking. We don't attain 100% of our tax, our revenue collection targets. So what it means is that the deficit in between keeps widening, and this is where we end up now with the loans, borrowings. The government tends to borrow to meet its objective. And what this means is that you are just pushing the problem down the road. You are pushing the problem down the road.
All right.
Because you keep borrowing, next year again we'll have interest and all that. And if you look at today's budget, CFS, what we call Consolidated Fund Services, is among the leading. It's the second one after the executive at 30.4. 1.2 trillion just to pay. Its Consolidated Fund Services is meant for interest repayment, principal loan repayment, and pension.
All right.
Out of this 1.2 trillion, only for pension is 200 billion thereabout. The other trillion is for loan.
All right.
So it's a huge task ahead.
All right. And you've talked about the deficit, of which stands at above 7 billion in this particular that we owe. And of course, this is something that we learn from the history. We know that I'm sure the government knows where to tighten the belt, where to loosen a little bit, where to tilt the focus and try to balance in as much as we can see. So a quick study. So if you know that by overtaxation, maybe you might force some investors out of business, and in that case out of the country, then that means during your revenue target and trajectory, that means there is this particular deficit. You've talked about the collection at 93%, then that means there is 7% that is lost somewhere. Well, is it something that government should actually take into consideration before, even during the planning and even before the planning of any budget, given the fact that the parameters are there, the indications, but instead of focusing on the gaps, we see an onward trajectory. So, from expert again, so how does it, balance all these aspects?
In my view, what should happen, I think we need to start looking at the budget making process as a whole. It's a legal process which takes on for the whole year, starting from around July, August. Upon approval of these estimates, we start the cycle for the coming year.
All right.
And the question then is, do we, they say you cut cloth as per your size. Basically, we need to start living within our means. And how can we achieve that? Should we consider legally to start looking at our laws and start from a revenue perspective and say how much revenue can we raise as a country? Right now, total revenue projected is at 3.34 trillion. And if we were to do 93% as per historical average on that, that could come slightly lower. So perhaps if we had started with that number and say we can afford to raise from history 3 trillion, what can this 3 trillion finance? Where we are right now as a country is that we start with the estimates of expenditure, then we think of how to finance. So by July, August, the government treasury seeks estimates from the departments and the ministries. They collect the estimates for expenditure. The fundraising, tax revenue measures come a bit later in the process. And I think then begs the question: should we now start considering, as a country, our budget making process, so that we start looking at our ability to finance first in terms of tax before, when we look at, say, this is what we can afford as a country. As a ministry, you have this much to plan yourself with. These are the projects you are leaving. These are the projects we are taking, according to our ability to finance.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, cutting your coat according to your size. That is very important at this particular moment. And of course, a question that will circulate is about whose budget is this? Because you have taken us through the budget making process, where it begins at immediately during the implementation of the first, as early as July. That's good. Well, when you make budget, according to my understanding, it's very critical to take the input of every key stakeholders. Well, for yourself, you're an accountant, of course, with a vast experience in this particular field. But does your opinion matter in this budget making process, especially when it comes to austerity measures?
So someone said public finance is what they call labor of love. We don't expect immediate results, and the reason, the logic is, it's the debts we are paying are not necessarily from the current administration. They're historical. They could be even, beyond 20 years, some of the debts, because the tenures for government debts are quite long, up to 50 years. So what this means, therefore, is even the current administration finds itself in a very strange position. They have their better agenda. They want, when they campaign on a platform, but you find yourself in a space where you have debts to pay, you have obligations to meet, which the country has committed to from previous projects, and you can't run away from those obligations. So with the, you already have staff, wage bill taking 1.2 trillion. You have the obligations arising out of historical debt. By the time you start looking at your own agenda as an administration, you have very small wiggle room, very small space to play with. And that's why you now see going full throttle to come up with all manner of taxes to fundraise, to fund their projects before their term comes to an end. Okay. Yeah.
And now let's take a look at now the budget allocation from each sector. Of course, the Ministry of Education has the largest share, the lion's share of this particular budget of 650 billion for this particular one. Well, my worry is every financial year, the last financial year, the Ministry of Education got at around 620 something billion, but the problem still persists. Now, is it the collection or the allocation? Because now this is somewhere that we must really, dig deeper, because in as much as you get the lion's share, but are they prudent? Will we actually, see that the money allocated to the ministry will actually, the ripple effect will be reflected in these learners? Because you live in this country and we have seen what is happening. Many institutions are deep down into cash crunch crisis. We had the junior secondary schools intern teachers demonstrating, wanting to be, observe permanent and under pensionable terms. Yes, we have seen some budget being allocated, but do you think maybe this will be the silver bullet that the country has been lacking as far as solving this education crisis is concerned?
So let me say this. For the Ministries of Education and Ministry of Health, the main drivers for their huge allocations is most of the time the human resource. These are ministries that are very highly human resource intensive. And specifically Ministry of Education, you look at that allocation, around 75% goes to TSE. what that means, therefore, is that it goes to salary increments as per the, CBS that are in place, the collective bargaining agreements, and also for the recent court ruling where the court said the interns teachers should actually enjoy equal terms like the rest of the teachers. Previously, how this whole thing came about, the issue of intern teachers was the government was being smart, so to say, in managing wage bill, which is a huge expense line in the government expenditure. So unfortunately, in being smart to manage the wage bill, the courts stated that it was being unfair because these are the same people doing the same work, kind of job. They are equally qualified. They are all graduates, but you are putting someone on contract for 1 or 2 years, whereas another person same work on permanent and pensionable terms. So the court found that unfair. The government may not have had intention to be unfair, but the whole driver was the budget. They didn't have the resources, or the resources are not enough, the resources are finite, and we still need more teachers. Even the ones they are on internship are not enough to support the CBC program, the junior high school.
Okay.
So I think it's a catch-22 scenario for the planners in government, where the huge takers of the budget are not necessarily investments in anything else but human resource. And at some point, even back in the day, the government extended or increased the retirement age to 60 years. But now, it has caught up with the government. They can no longer increase. Now all these people have to go on retirement. Okay. And it's a huge expense in pension. And that's where we see all these allocations being driven mostly by wage bill.
All right. And now the executive has also been allocated, and this is, additional, and we are talking about now the winners and the losers. Executive and the office of the president has been allocated 5.1 billion. The office of his deputy, that is 4.8 billion. We have the office of prime CS, that is 1.1 billion. State House has 9.4 billion. Parliament, of course, got additional, and now their figure stands at 4.4 billion. When you take a look at the priority areas, where should we actually base our priorities when it comes to budget allocation? Do we really need these figures for the office of the president, the deputy president, and all this? Where should we base our priorities as a nation?
So as a nation, there are more pressing priorities, I must say. However, given the budgeting challenge that I had mentioned earlier, where we tend to submit our expenditure estimates before we look at the revenue, it puts us at a difficult place. This is the executive arm. They will convince, or we will want to believe they are right. And once they share their estimates, expenditure estimates, chances are most of the estimates will always find a way they will go through. And this is opposed to a situation where we had come up with our ability to finance and told them, State House, we can only afford to give you 2 billion, for example. In that case, it would be an open and shut discussion. But from a point where they have a lot of projects, the State House, they say, was built by the colonialists, or it was renovated 50 years ago, so to say, and it now needs to be modernized, such and such things. Investment projects which have been undergoing or ongoing, and they have to be concluded. You have all these international obligations in place, the peace treaties in South Sudan, and what have you. All this, so long as the process of budgeting starts from expenditure, I think somehow we will always find a way of justifying our expenses.
All right. Now, going by the trajectory, we have seen like the figures keep on rising each financial year. Well, the worry is now the budget stands at 4 trillion. Who knows about the next financial year? And that is a big question, because it's a matter of wait and see how the event will unfold. Well, we are talking about living within our means, and of course, even the Treasury today say that there are some of the austerity measures, like including freezing hiring, as one way of trying to limit and expenditures from different state departments. That's fair enough, but where should the pendulums first settle? Because I believe if you want to talk about the discussion about austerity measures, then we must lead by example. So when you look at these budgets, what are some of the unnecessary allocations that maybe will have reduced so that we can ease the burden on Kenyans?
Going through the budgets, it's so hard to place a finger and say this may not be unnecessary, but I think what needs to really come out, and we need to see a lot of focus. I would love to see a lot of focus by the government is I've seen priority areas where they have mentioned increasing productive areas with a focus on specific areas in agriculture. And I think if we could focus as a nation in baking a bigger cake, a much bigger pie, so that when it comes to taxation, it doesn't hit us so much, I think would make a lot of sense. Injecting more resources, I think we have seen the continued putting, government has put money, 10 billion in the fertilizer subsidy. They're coming up with, they're focusing on edible oils, supporting farmers by retram, all that. At the end of the day, if this is successful, because some of us, when we grew up, these things were actually working. Okay. There were areas that were known to grow by retram. There were areas that we used to grow sunflower. But along the way, those things disappeared. There was a failure in the system. And looking at the CS today, speaking to a revitalization of those institutions, hopefully can make the economy and increase the cake in terms of increasing employment and production in the economy.
Even as we wind this particular discussion, because this I'll tie it and it will serve as your closing remark. Well, let's now switch focus to finance bill. Well, we have key, and this is very key, commodities that the government is planning to, impose a tax on it. The 16% on bread. We have 25% on crude oil, and of course, if this see the light of the day, then these particular two areas are very critical to ordinary mwananchi. So first of all, let me get your count on why will government tax essential commodities that majority of Kenyans depend on that? What is the logic? What is the wisdom behind this, even as we close?
Honestly, I wouldn't say I see any wisdom. I think it's all about harmonization. They are saying they are bringing more products to be standardized under one regime rate. But I think it's unfair, because then it's pushing the ordinary Kenyan to the brink. And hopefully, as the committee in Parliament retreats to do their report, they actually listen to what Kenyans said. Okay. Hopefully they will remove, because the one on edible oils also will really mess Kenyans a lot, because everything will rise in terms of the food basket.
All right.
And hopefully they will listen to us and submissions that many Kenyans made and do away with those.
All right. We have really, run out of time and the director is on my ears. So we are taking a very short break, but thank you so much. That is CPA Cornelius Ngetich. Asante sana for making time to give us insight on this budget 2024-2025. Your time